We are now joined by one of the contenders in the race for the White House, Democratic presidential candidate, Tom Steyer. It is great to have you here. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So we have new entrants like Deval Patrick, like potentially Michael Bloomberg. We always joke that we can barely make out all the names on our big card of all of the folks running. So what do you make of it as somebody who's in this race, that there are so many people and more coming?
Well, let me say this, Julie. I think it's clear by what Deval Patrick did and what Mike Bloomberg is talking about doing that this race is completely wide open. What they're saying and what I think you can pick up from the polls is that there are more undecideds today than there were 3 months ago. So this process has played out. I thought I was the last person before Deval Patrick to get in this race. But I think that what they're saying is it's anybody's ball game, and that it's going to break late, and people are going to make up their mind much closer to the election dates of the different caucuses and primaries so that it's possible for somebody to come in.
So I want to show you something. Elizabeth Warren, if we have it, is now selling a mug that has on it billionaire tears. Now, clearly she is going after people like you, billionaires, over the wealth tax proposal. So on all of this, where do you stand? Because we've got Michael Bloomberg, we've got you, billionaires, and part of the concern as for why Bloomberg and Deval Patrick are jumping in is that the Democrats seem to be split over a very left-wing progressive agenda and a more centrist agenda.
Well, Adam, you may not know this, but I proposed a wealth tax over a year ago. And I've said that I don't believe Michael Bloomberg should get into this race unless he's willing to embrace a wealth tax. That inequality in income and assets, wealth, has increased so dramatically over the last 40 years. I think if you want to represent the Democratic Party and the American people, you absolutely have to address this inequality issue.
What about Elizabeth Warren's proposals on the wealth tax? Are those in line with yours, or has she gone too far?
Well, if you look at my wealth tax, and we're actually going to come out with I proposed it a year ago when I wasn't running for president in a simplistic way, and I think we're going to come out with a more nuanced, granular proposal. But it basically starts at a lower place and has lower rates. And hers, she just changed when she came out with her attempt to pay for the Medicare for all. She came out with a new wealth tax and I think doubled what she'd said previously. Mine was an attempt and remains an attempt both to raise some of the resources that we need to pay for social programs, and it's also an implicit acceptance that we need to redo the income and asset redistribution that's happened to the benefit of the richest Americans over the last 40 years at an extreme level, very undemocratic, very unjust, very unfair, and honestly, quite unnoticed.
So we're now a year out from the election, give or take, and this field has to consolidate at some point. I know we have new entrants, but at some point we are going to have to see this field shrink a little bit. Now, you said that you think voters are actually going to make their decisions closer and closer and closer to the day. Does that mean for you, because you trail right now in the polls to some of those frontrunners like Biden, like Sanders, like Warren, are you going to stay in until the last possible minute? What for you is going to be your exit strategy?
Look, I don't think I'm going to have an exit
well,
strategy.
what for you is essentially going to be the thing that pushes you out of this race?
My experience of this race, and I've been in for about 4 months, is when people hear what I have to say, which is really different from what everybody else says, when they see my experience, my background, and what I've done, which is really different from what everyone else has done, then I think I do really well.
But a lot of people have now heard that message, right? Because, listen, you're a guy whose background is in investing in private equity. And when I think about your...
Well, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Actually, I've spent the last 10 years...
You have, yes, but...
acting within the political system as an outsider, representing people, putting together coalitions of American citizens, building one of the biggest grassroots organizations in the United States.
And trying to impeach the president, $47 million of your own dollars.
The reason, that's what I'm talking about. The reason I ask it that way is because, at least traditionally in your old life, you thought about return on investment. And you have invested a lot in your own campaign. You've spent, I think,
$47 million
on an ad campaign. So a lot of people, you've put your ads in front of a lot of people, and yet still polling at only around 1%. So is that a good return on investment for
Let me say
you?
this.
And would
Julie,
that money be better spent supporting one of the other candidates?
Well, first of all, I did start one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States. We did do the largest youth voter mobilization in 2018. We have talked to tens of millions of people at the door with our partners in labor, and we're still doing all of that. So when people talk about either or, actually we're doing both. And so when people suggest I should be doing the other things, well, I'm not running it personally myself, but I am supporting them and they are happening. And the other thing I'd say is this: we are focused on the early primary states, very different from what these new entrants say they're going to do. And in those states, I believe that I'm in 5th place. So actually, I think my experience is, even though I'm not a famous person, and even though in those states a lot of people, in spite of the fact that we've run TV ads, do not know who I am, when they hear who I am, then I do really well. And so my goal in this is to continue to say the things that I've been saying, to try and get people to know who I am, and to have them respond, because that's the experience I've had.
I want Jason to get in on this.
Real quick, where do you stand on trade with China?
I would get rid of the trade war on day one. I think it's a mistake. It's always been a mistake, and it's a failure. Do I know, having invested around the world for years, that China cheats on trade? Of course I know. Do I know that they steal intellectual property? Yes. Do I know they close markets to American companies? Of course I know that. Is this the correct response to that? Obviously not. It's a failure. So I'd end it on day one, and I would deal with China directly on the issues where they're breaking laws and breaking rules of the WTO, and I'd get a coalition of other countries whose intellectual property is also being stolen, where Chinese markets are also being closed to their companies, and I'd go after them directly on the things they do hard. But I also know that this isn't this attitude of Mr. Trump's, that we come up with the America First attitude. Everything's bilateral, everything's confrontational, everything's competitive. That isn't the way the world actually works. We can cooperate with people. We have traditional allies. We have shared values. We have shared goals. That's what we should work on. And so I would get rid of it on day one. It's a failure.
So if not you, then who among this field would you throw your weight and your support behind?
I'm behind me.
But if you don't win, but if you do not win in the primaries, if essentially the Democratic nominee, as you look at the field right now, who are you supporting the most? Who do you think is the best bet?
I would support any Democrat, but one of the things that I've learned in politics is not to answer conditional questions because it just gets you into a pile of trouble. I believe, look, I'm saying something different from other people. I'm saying the problem we have is the government's been bought by corporations. That you can talk all you want about the different policy nuances that people care about, and I'll talk about them until the cows come home and they matter. But we're not in a position to pass any of those policies. They're not new. They've been around. They haven't been passed. This government is literally broken. The question is, what are we going to do about that? And what are we going to do about climate? And I'm the only person who said climate's the #1 priority. I'd declare a state of emergency on day one. I'd make it the focus of my foreign policy. If we don't deal with that, we're in a lot of trouble. We have to deal with it. We can deal with it. And we can deal with it in a way that makes us better employed, healthier, higher wages, create millions of jobs, really reinvent the United States.
Good luck on November 20th, right? The debate's the 20th, isn't it?
Next Wednesday's the 20th. Yep.
Break a leg.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Democratic
Julie.
presidential candidate Tom Steyer, thank you for joining.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.